Hello everybody and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm going to look at President Biden and I'm going to try and give some reflections and some analysis of his presidency so far. I'm recording this video in June 2022, just before the US politics A-level paper, so hopefully some last minute preparation from in there, and hopefully this won't age too badly, which is always the worry with doing something like this where you're assessing a president partway through their term. So how is Biden doing? Well, his future is starting to look a little uncertain. There are already whispers that he may not be the Democrat choice in 2024, a combination of low approval ratings, failure to deliver significant legislation, and his age all come into play in these whispers and this suggestion that maybe the Democrats might look elsewhere. Former President Trump also looms very large over the political landscape in the US. Some Democrats demand that Biden fights harder to attack Trump's lies and legacy by pushing a highly progressive agenda. Others want him to find compromise with moderate Republicans and hold the center ground. So he's dealing with a slightly disunited party, but overwhelmingly it's kind of the progressive wing that he seems to be failing to impress. And the televised congressional hearings into the January 6th attack certainly keeps Trump at the top of the political agenda. One thing that might be a determining factor on Biden being the choice in 2024 might be whether it's a potential rematch with Trump or whether someone else is the Trump nominee, particularly if there's a younger nominee for the Republican Party. That might make the Democrats think twice about putting Biden up. Biden, I would argue, has lost a great deal of momentum since the first part of his presidency. Again, that's not unusual in a presidency, and he's failing to generate much enthusiasm for the Democrat faithful, who initially kind of wildly celebrated his defeat of Trump and were looking forward to a new, more progressive era. And Biden arguably overpromised and has underdelivered. Whilst the Democrats control the House, the 50-50 split in the Senate has made progress very difficult, especially with the Republicans rejecting bipartisanism and this kind of highly partisan politics, which is kind of got a grip of America at the moment. I mean, the kind of operation that Biden needs to be able to do is just highly unlikely. Now, whether you blame him for that, I mean, he talks about bipartisanship a lot when he was getting elected, or whether you kind of go, well, he's just a victim of the circumstances of what's going on. It is something for you to evaluate and make your own judgment on. So Biden's approval rating is just not very good at all. From January to May 2022, his job approval rating hovered between 40 and 42%. So it's very consistent, and it's very consistently not very good. This means that Biden is performing little better than Trump was at the same point before the midterms in 2018, in which the Democrats made significant gains and took the House. So the Republicans will see Biden's approval ratings as a clear sign they can do the same in November. Trump never recovered from those low ratings going up to May, June. Whether Biden will, again, is one of the difficulties making video at this point. It's difficult to say. They may recover. They may not. They may not. I mean, possibly the worst news for Biden on this is that at the start of his presidency, he had a 57% approval rating, whilst Trump started on 44%. So that means that the fact that they are now in comparable positions at the point heading towards their midterms means that Biden's popularity has dropped very dramatically, whilst Trump's fell off only a small amount. I mean, started from a lower position. Now, and as already mentioned, that there are these whispers about whether Biden is the right candidate for 2024, and that has started. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently, although being less than enthusiastically supportive of Biden, was supportive of Biden, but refused to absolutely back him as the right candidate for the Democrats in 2024. There are several kind of big issues that I think it's worth examining and thinking about in terms of Biden. So the first is what I've already mentioned, that he's failed to get any kind of really significant legislation through. And the first example is his aim to put Roe Wade into legislation. This failed due to not receiving support from all Democrats and with unified opposition from the Republicans. And he's recently said he might have to resort to executive orders in dealing with the outcome if the Supreme Court overturns Roe Wade. And constitutionally, that could be quite difficult. And whilst Biden personally failed to build much enthusiastic support, some Democrats believe issues such as the changes to Roe Wade and abortion and other kind of issues where the Republicans are vulnerable, such as things to do with the January 6th attacks, and that we've seen some some people involved or supportive of that action who have now been put forward as Republican candidates and have won in primaries. So all those kind of things might play in it. And some of the Democrats are kind of going, well, actually, there might be enough stuff going on to prevent the predicted Republican landslide in the midterms. So abortion, guns, January the 6th, all that might come into play. And so Biden's personal kind of lack of appeal might not actually be a breaking point for the Democrats in November 22. Much of Biden's time in office, you must remember, was overshadowed by the final stages of the COVID crisis, and he got so criticised from both sides, really. He got criticised for going too far, according to some, with his vaccine mandates, and then he got criticised for not doing enough, especially in terms of providing enough tests and reducing the period of isolation. And this is particularly linked to the fact that there was strong lobbying from groups like Delta Airlines, and then Biden seemed to quite fold quite quickly in terms of the length of time for isolation. Now, one of the big kind of centerpiece of his legislative program is this idea of Build Back Better, and this is his flagship policy, and it came with an initial a very big price tag of $3.5 trillion, which is an eye-watering amount of money. But it was blocked by the Republicans with the help of Joe Manchin, and Manchin is a Democrat senator from West Virginia, but he is highly conservative and votes with the Republicans probably more frequently than he votes with the Democrats on some issues. Now, the Build Back Better bill included money for infrastructure, for childcare and preschools, affordable housing, affordable Care Act credits, home care for those on Medicare and Medicaid, and a whole new tranche of apprenticeships, electric car tax credits, money for solar energy and for home installation. So we've got green issues, we've got issues to tackle social mobility, issues to tackle poverty, things to rebuild the economy with infrastructure, health issues. So it was a really ambitious thing. It got watered down, and then they thought they got it out, they were going to get something over the line with Manchin's support, and then Manchin changed his mind, and there was a big kind of Freudian fallout out of that. Again, it's not good for a president to not get their flagship policy through, and also particularly when you've got a member of your own party who ultimately is the person who blocks it. Now, bear in mind, we might be looking at the situation after November where Biden loses control of the House or faces a Republican majority in the Senate, at which point getting things through will become even more difficult. And so there is some concern, or some analysts who are saying, look, he might well have missed his best chance of getting stuff done, and if he's failed now, then the chances of that being turned around over the next couple of years is fairly low. There are some issues relating to the Supreme Court which have been really interesting. So the appointment of Supreme Court Justice Jackson is a kind of a real keystone moment in American history of the Supreme Court. She's the first black woman to become a Supreme Court justice, and this is something that Biden said he was going to do and that he delivered on. So in that we can see a big win. Biden has spoken out against the leaked material that suggests the Supreme Court is ready to overturn Roe versus Wade. And we've already said that he's looked at legislation and he's talking about possible executive orders in relation to this. The Conservative dominance of the court following Trump's 3 appointments mean that Biden is unlikely to find much support from the judicial branch when it comes to issues of social policy or guns or clashes with states regarding voting rights. And so this is something where, when you're assessing Biden, you have to kind of put it in that context that he doesn't have kind of all positive things lined up for him. There are some significant barriers, structural barriers within the political system that stand in his way. In terms of economic policy, we saw the American Rescue Act, American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which created a significant stimulus package, which passed despite Republican opposition. The final act, however, failed to deliver the $15 federal minimum wage. However, this has been brought in for federal contractors and subcontractors via executive order, but it did provide an enormous amount of money pumped into the American economy. Now, at the time, that looks like a huge positive, particularly with the stimulus checks landing in Americans' bank accounts as the economic outlook was looking fairly grim. However, now we've got runaway inflation. Things like big stimulus packages maybe don't look quite as great as they did to start off with. Biden has made very strong claims about how well the economy is doing, and it did initially recover very well from the COVID crisis, and growth in 2021 was at 5.7%. And the economy was performing far better compared to how it had been in 2019, compared to other economies, notably the other big economies like Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom. So Biden made very strong claims about how the US was economically outperforming the rest of the world. Those words might not have been perfectly chosen. It is true that unemployment was rapidly reduced, and America seems to be on a strong footing. However, there are very significant recent issues, notably inflation, particularly the surge in petrol prices or gas prices, as they would say in the States. In May, consumer prices were up 50% on 2021. This has led calls for a massive increase in production of oil in the USA to counter the impact of the war in Ukraine and sanctions on Russian oil. And this has become part of a broader kind of pushback against the green agenda, which Biden has been pushing. So economically, things started very well, and there were significant improvements. But again, economically, and this could be really very significant going into November, Americans at the moment are not feeling better off. They're really feeling the pinch of inflation, in particular the increase in transport costs with the rising gas prices. So the next area I'm going to look at is foreign policy. Now, one bit which was undoubtedly an unmitigated disaster was the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and this was very damaging to Biden's reputation both at home and abroad. Now, the policy of withdrawing from Afghanistan goes back to Trump, but the blame for the terrible execution of this process and the organisation must fall on Biden and his administration. And I believe this is something that Biden has kind of held his hands up and gone, we didn't do a great job here. The war between Russia and Ukraine has been very testing for Biden. On one hand, he's been strong in his support for Ukraine, a leading part of a united international movement in supplying Ukraine with weapons and other things. He's taken a hard line on sanctions against Russia. On the other hand, however, he's made some notable gaffes, which the White House has then had to kind of very strongly and very rapidly backpedal over, notably when he seemed to call for regime change in Russia and called on the Russian people to remove Putin. And the White House has been very clear since that the regime change in Russia is not a US policy. And again, this was kind of a bit of a propaganda coup for Putin, where he could point to this and again use this to build support at home. and led to the very real potential of kind of escalating the war. Very recently, the summit of the Americas turned into a bit of a disaster for Biden. He refused to invite the three dictators, autocrats of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. Other countries in America saw this as a double standard, given his willingness to work with autocrats elsewhere, notably Saudi Arabia, with the stuff going on with oil in the moment. And this has led to the Mexican president and others boycotting the summit. And so again, it gives this impression that Biden doesn't have a great kind of international standing. Gun laws are a key issue for Biden, and he's for a long time been an advocate of stronger gun controls. In 2022, there have been some horrendous, very shocking mass shootings, including at Robb Elementary School in Texas in May that saw 21 people killed, 19 of whom were children. We also saw the shooting in Buffalo, New York, where 10 people were killed in a racially motivated attack. Again, this is a bit of a big ongoing story. We were reaching some unbelievable statistics on this, where kind of more children in America are killed through by guns and by anything else. We've recently seen the March for Our Lives organization organize about 450 protests around the country. And on the 13th of June, bipartisan support appears to have finally been reached on a series of gun control measures, including some strengthening of background checks and tighter restrictions on particularly checks of under 21-year-olds. Biden has welcomed this move, but agreed this action still falls well short of the ban on assault weapons and on large magazines that he advocates. A more radical bill was passed in the House by the Democrats, but is very, very unlikely to succeed in the Senate. So at least this small step in terms of some tightening of background checks is likely to go through. And again, this might be a turning point. This might be a sign of Biden able to build some kind of bipartisan support on some what is always a very, very contentious and difficult issue in the states. I mean, it also, in the broader bit, it might be a sign of public opinion starting to shift in the states, and we've seen a kind of an enormous outpouring over the horror of these shootings and growing protest as well. The gun lobby still remains fairly strong, but very strong. But hopefully, there is some progress here. In terms of comparison with the UK, I mean, we see some similarities. So similar to Boris Johnson, Biden, as I've already discussed, is facing some disquiet about his leadership from his party, and he is delivering poor popularity ratings at the moment. So that's something that Biden and Boris have in common. He's also facing a difficult time in the midterms, which are coming up, just as Johnson is facing a difficult time in the upcoming by-elections. There is no clear frontrunner to take over from Biden, although there are doubts about whether he would be the first choice nomination in 2024, and equally with Johnson, those disquiet about his leadership, but no clear frontrunner or clear alternative in the Conservative Party. Johnson and Biden are taking a very similar approach to war in Ukraine in terms of a tough stance against Russia and supplying of weapons to the Ukraine. There are also some significant differences. So whilst Johnson has just survived the party mechanism, which could have seen him removed, in the US, there is no similar mechanism for the Democrats to remove Biden. Biden faces a very, very tough job getting things through to Congress, as I've been discussing in the video, whilst Johnson's in a much stronger position. Though, of course, it will be interesting to see how much of a rebellion, if any, there is against things like the upcoming bill on the Northern Ireland Protocol. So we are seeing two leaders, both with the potential for the occasional gaffer sticking their foot in the mouth, with some questioning behind them about their leadership, but existing and operating in very, very different contexts. So again, particularly strong structural differences between the UK and the US. I hope that's been useful and given you some insight into Biden's presidency so far. Again, I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope this doesn't date too badly. I'm sure people will quickly let me know in the comments as things I've said are going to happen don't come to pass. If they do, hopefully this will help people with their upcoming exam. If you are revising for the A-level politics exam on US politics, then do check out my channel, check out my playlist, which has got a whole range of stuff that should help you get ready for that. Again, and if you're just not in your final year, but you're still studying A-level politics, there's loads and loads on my playlist looking at all the different aspects of A-level politics, component 1 and component 2, and then 3A on America. And there's also a whole range of history stuff on that as well. So check out the channel, subscribe, please hit like. If you've got any comments, please leave them below. You can also now find my channel on TikTok with some nice short videos on there. Thank you very much again for watching.